Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us on LA Theater Bites. Today, we have a really cool interview with Jen Albert, who is a fight coordinator, actress, producer, and works with the School of Night Theater Company, which she co founded. She's an award winning fight choreographer who is starring in the award winning Battlesong of Boudica, opening at the Hudson Theaters from April 9th to 30th after having its 2022 Hollywood Fringe world premiere. Jen, thank you so much for being here on the show.
Hi, Matthew. Thank you for having me.
I'm so excited to have you here because one, I love your work. I love your shows. You do such a cool job of everything from your Star Trek show to your Hercules Insane, which is still one of my favorite Fringe shows I've ever seen. Punch and Judy. This you've done so much incredible work. I know that not everyone might be as familiar with your work as I am, but for those who aren't, tell
Oh,
us
well,
about the School of Night.
oh, yeah. Well, the school night is me and my husband, Christopher Johnson. I'm the managing director and he's the artistic director. So all of those shows are his brainchild. He comes up with everything. And I say, yeah, I don't know about that this year. Let's try it another year. That's sort of how we work together. And then he um, typically writes the shows because he's the writer and he directs them. There's nothing that I've wanted to direct yet, so we'll see if that happens. Um, but he does it all. A lot of it's in verse, most of it's in verse. He writes these amazing shows, and with the idea that I will produce and do the fight choreography. I'm actually very rarely in any of the shows. It's just a lot of work. I prefer not to be. But he wrote Battlesong of Boudica for me, so I'm in it.
Well, I mean, first of all, you are a good actress. I understand that wanting to be more behind the scenes, as someone who does more stuff behind the scenes as well. And it's a really taxing job to do fight choreography. For those who are uninitiated, what is fight choreography?
Well, fight choreography is taking a moment of violence from the script and choreographing it in a very safe way within the parameters of what the actors can do and creating, essentially telling the story with violence. Uh,
Mm.
and it can be swords, it can be knives, it can be unarmed, it can be a lamp, it can be a pillow. Whatever it is that is sort of illustrating violence, you're sort of just choreographing that safely. I like to make sure my actors have some fight training. They don't always. For my shows, they have to. For other shows, if I'm choreographing outside of my company, I work with what I work with, and I just make sure that I'm creating something that the actors can do and make look real and keep it safe. The trick is making it look real. Not everybody knows how to make it look real.
Right. That assumes it's hard, especially on stage. You know, if a movie, you can kind of do some quick cuts, you can do some editing, you have like six different cameras on the scene. But with theater, everyone from different angles is seeing this production. So you really have to do some cool, like kind of trickery and body placement to make sure that people are like, oh, this is someone could get hurt right now.
Oh yeah, no, theater is much harder than doing film. I mean, film, yeah, you're totally right. It's like, where's the camera? Oh, I don't even have to touch them because the camera's over there. Great. Yeah, great. I'm 10 feet away from them. It looks amazing. Whereas on stage, you have to create the sound of the hits. You have to do it in real time. Hi, Theodora. Uh, it's my cat. One of my cats. You have to make it look real, intense, tell the story, be safe, and not be exhausted afterwards because you likely have lines.
Right, right. Like, you know, that breath control, that practice, that body control. It's a very intense process. You know, I've directed and film, not on stage. I've never directed a stage of combat on it, but in film, when you do combat, like that's like a big chunk of the day. Sometimes that's the entire day. It's
Oh
just
yeah.
doing some of the stunts because it does take a lot out of the actors and the stunt performers. But you're talking about like, hey, this is a 90-minute, 2 hour play, whatever, and you got to keep going after the scene.
Yeah, and you know, luckily, most of the time, I'm knocking on wood for realsies. Uh, I've never had anybody get hurt,
Mm.
but it happens. You know, somebody hits something the wrong way. You accident. I mean, back when I was in my with my theater company back in Chicago, I totally got punched in the face. You know,
Oh,
you just gotta, and we always have a safe word. You kind of you call the safe word and let everybody know, okay, I've been hurt, something's up. Let's just chill. Let's just relax. We're gonna go to the next move or whatever you're planning on doing. I did not call that safe word. I just continued to get pummeled and ran off stage after the fight and was like, I'm bleeding. I'm pretty sure I'm bleeding. I'm pretty sure everybody saw that. Nobody saw it. It was fine. I had another fight like immediately after. So whatever. But sometimes it happens. Like you get hurt. And you have hopefully stopgaps for that. But that's why rehearsal is so important. Every minute of stage combat takes 7 hours of rehearsal.
oh my gosh.
Yeah. So even when you think you got it, you don't. You still have to rehearse it and tweak it and fix it and make it as safe as possible. You know, the other problem is you don't want people on autopilot.
Right.
Surprisingly, during autopilot, people forget moves.
Right. That's what the mistakes happen.
Yeah. So it's you have to be in the moment. It's tricky with stage combat for theater because you want to be in the moment. But Stanislavski is not my friend in stage combat. I need you to be the actor. I need you to step out of the character and have control.
Yes.
Play, right? Play your beats, play your goals, do all of that because I very much say it's your blocking and you have to justify it. But I need you to be a controlled human being so that you don't hurt your partner.
Yes. Yes. No, I think that's such a good point. And such a, I mean, there's so much safety, there's so much trust involved, there's so much professionalism involved with the fight choreography. And I'm curious, how did you even get into it? How did you figure out like this is what I like to do and also this is what I can do?
Um, No, it all started back in college. I mean, we had stage combat classes. I went to Columbia College in Chicago, and when I, looked at the pick your classes book, I was like, stage combat, totally gonna do it, so awesome, yeah, I can't wait. And then I just took stage combat every semester and just kept taking new weapons and learning new things. And then after graduation, I joined a theater company called Babes with Blades,
Mm.
which was an all-female stage combat company. And what was fortunate about that is the thing is at that time, women didn't have a whole lot of stage combat to do. We
Mm.
were usually presented as the victim on stage. And so this company was very much about, well, I can fight with a sword, I can fight with a knife, I can fight with a quarterstaff, I can do a martial arts fight. I'm going to go do that instead of waiting for somebody to write a play that's going to have that in it.
Right.
So what that did was help me keep up my skills because I'll tell you, if I didn't have that company, my skills would have been lost and forgotten. There was not enough opportunities to do this stuff. So that sort of kept up my training. And then I took martial arts, and that just made my choreography better.
Mm.
And people started hiring me. It just sort of became this, hey, Jen knows stage combat. Yeah, I do. Okay, can you help us with this? Sure. And it just kind of went from there.
Oh, that's awesome. But no,
Yeah.
it's true. It is. I just saw a really good theater production of the Scottish play. I know I'm not in the theater now, but I'm always nervous to
I
say
know. I hear you.
the Scottish play, and it was a queer version of it, and they had non-binary and lesbian women playing most of the parts, and they had some stage combat in it, and it was so interesting to see because you're thinking, wow, like when these plays were made, this combat was, it's all men, and even in Shakespearean theater, even the female parts are played by males. And so it's kind of like, you're like, oh, wow, like it's a quiet kind of thing. It does change the dynamic when you have a bunch of people who are not men
Hmm.
playing these swords and fighting and killing each other and like they had like swords that made the clang sound when they hit. So you think like, oh my gosh, like if someone makes a mistake right now, they could actually get really hurt. If that they and I think something about it. I didn't really think about it in the sense when I was watching it, but now listening to your story about it, it is something that doesn't happen enough in theater. It's something that I don't know if it's just because we keep going back to these old plays that were written. you
Yeah.
know, people who listen to this show for a long time know that I'm a big advocate for letting the past of theater not die, but just putting it in an old folks' home and like coming to visit every once in a while. But like it's time to move on. So a lot of these plays don't allow the current theater world to play interesting parts, and I think stage combat is a factor into that equation.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I completely agree with you. And you know, to that point, it is sort of taking these old products and reinventing them and creating them into a new thing, which I think is amazing. I mean, yeah, the company I used to be with, like, did all female Shakespeare, and this was back in the whatever the '90s when people weren't really doing that. It was still a new thing. Now that happens all the time, so that's great. And like the LGBTQ communities like doing stuff. I mean, I think we're really exploring things that should have been explored for a long time that are now coming to the forefront. So that's really cool. And the amount and stage combat being brought into that is really awesome.
No,
Uh,
yeah, it's so like exciting and it's riveting because stage combat, as you know, and as we were kind of alluding to, when you're seeing it, it does have a sense of, even though yes, it's more staged, quote unquote, than perhaps the film. It feels more real. There's a element of danger in it for the
mhm.
audience where they're watching, like something really could go wrong.
Yeah, oh, it's true. Oh, it's true, and it has.
No, it's I'm always nervous when I watch a play and someone's doing something, anything. Someone's standing on a ladder in a play, and I'm like, oh gosh, what's that ladder? And so people have to think about that, and I think it's starting to be more embraced as more and more people are starting to come to theater. I think theater reaches its natural evolution of this generation. I think stage combat is something that we're going to start seeing more and more in our shows.
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, for a long time, when we first moved to LA, there was no. The first of all, the stage combat was bad. I can't tell you how many times we walked out of shows because it was obvious to me they didn't have a fight choreographer, nor was one credited in the program.
Mm.
But that they kind of just said to the actors, "I don't know, you're just gonna slap them here," which is the same thing with intimacy direction. I'm an intimacy director as well, and it's like telling actors, "Okay, now just go ahead and kiss."
Right.
Well, I wouldn't tell two actors to just go make up a fight unless I was stunt coordinating something and these were my stunt fighters and you know what I mean? And they have the capacity to create fight choreography. But I am not taking two theater actors and going, okay, so just like, oh, there's a knife fight here. I don't know, figure it out. Let me let me know when you have something cool. All right, I'll be over here.
No, it's true. It's like you can tell, you can always tell. It's especially if you've seen it in a play, you can tell when this was properly rehearsed, when there was an expert on set, and then you can also tell when like maybe there was nobody on set, or there was someone who was quote unquote fight choreographer who really was just like, yeah, throw this punch, and
Mhm.
but it's much like you mentioned intimacy coordination, which I know you also do. That's also something I'm starting to see a lot
Oh
more
yeah.
in theater, which has been very interesting because I think much like stage combat, live intimacy on stage, especially when you go beyond like a simple kiss, is something that in the theater context, the audience, it's like the olden days when people would wait outside a room while a marriage was consummated. You're just like, oh,
Yes.
I guess.
Yes. Yeah. Well, the funny thing is, and I say this every time somebody asks me, it's like, intimacy coordination in film has actually been happening for a very long time. It's just that, and it was usually done by stunt coordinators. I mean, even when I was just doing fight choreography in theater, yeah, I would get the occasional director say, "Hey, we have this little scene here. It's just kind of this non-consensual, and there's some violence. Can you help?" Oh yes, yes, I'm going to help with that. Give me a second. Uh, but it's been going on for a long time. It's just that, as I keep saying, we now have structure, we have training, and we have a title.
I love that. No, I just for the first time ever had directed a movie that needed a intimacy coordinator because there was a couple intimate things happening on set. And it's so funny. I just saw like on Twitter a few days ago because of this TV show called Swarm, where there's like a very steamy sex scene.
Uh-huh.
Some people, especially the younger generation, really thought it was like basically real, essentially pornography, and like all these intimacy coordinators had to come on and be like, that is not like it is intimacy coordination is actually it's one of at least in my experience, my limited experience, and from what I've heard from others, it's one of the least sexy things that happens on a set. It is
Oh
so
God.
clinical.
It's not sexy at all. And it's so choreographed and so yeah, I mean it's so neutral. Like that's part of it is like making sure you're using neutral deloaded language,
Mm.
and that it really is. I've had people say to me, I was really nervous about this, but now this is really kind of hard work, and my brain is like thinking, this is not what I expected. Like, yeah, I know, because we're counting and we're doing pacing and we're doing angles and circles. And they're like, I didn't expect geometry. I'm like, yeah, it's, well, you know.
Right. It kind of changes the vibe when it's like, all right, stand here, and you sit there and like tilt your head like 50 degrees this way.
Exactly. Literally
Look
that.
real.
Literally that. I mean, it's the same thing with stage combat. It's so choreographed
Right.
that you just don't have the time to worry about the vulnerability ends up sort of dissipating because you're just like, wait, my left hand is supposed to be raised to a 90 degree, and I'm going to touch like clay, but it's muscle level touch or it's powder level touch, right? It's all these words that yeah. So yeah.
Well, no, I think it's so exciting. And so now, of course, you have a new show that's coming out that I'm sure has quite a bit of choreography going on, which is the Battlesong of Boudica. Now, Boudica, she's, in my opinion, one of the most fascinating people in ancient history, who has a pretty both thrilling and also very dark story to her. But it's kind of like this middle finger to the Roman Empire. And
Yeah.
tell me a little bit about this. Like, how did this project come about?
Chris is a history nerd. And I think he's been wanting to tell this story for a long time. And like Hercules with Seneca. So he likes doing all of these old plays from like 60 AD, and right, that's his thing. He's done a Roswitha play at some point, and that was like 11th century, and she was like one of the first female playwrights. So he's like a super nerd. I say that in the best way because I am not a history nerd at all. And I knew who Boudica was, but because back when I was in Babes with Blades, we did a little scene about Boudica. Um, but yeah, so 61 AD, the Romans, they're doing their colonization thing like they do. They're on her lands. Her husband is, they've sort of made an alliance with the Romans, and it kind of doesn't go well. Her husband dies in battle. And because her husband dies, all of his possessions are now the possessions of Rome.
Mm.
And she is not up for that. And in the middle of them sort of seizing her property, they rape the daughters. They brutalize her there's a whipping scene in this show, so just heads up, trigger warning. None of like the actual sexual assault does not happen on stage, so just know that. But it is vocal. And whipping scene is live on stage. You get to see me whipped. If you don't like me, cool. You come see me whipped. If you do like me, it's okay. I get my revenge. So that happens, and after that, she goes on a revenge spree, and essentially, uh, hi Theodora. Yes, I know. She kills almost the entire Ninth Legion of the Roman army, which was an impossible thing to do. Now she had like 80,000 Celts get together and do this.
Right.
So and yeah, there's like full battle scenes. We have like three huge battle scenes where the entire cast is on stage. That's a cast of 16.
Wow.
We have there's gladiator fights. There's a couple of knife fights. And there's also like stylized dance. This show is super stylized in the coolest way. But yeah, so that is the story of Boudica. It's a revenge tragedy, so it probably isn't going to go well. I'm just going to say.
Yeah.
But,
If you look up the Wikipedia, yeah.
yeah, you kind of know if you just read about it, you kind of get that it doesn't go well.
Yeah.
It kind of goes well, but then not so much.
Exactly. It's very akin to Braveheart. I guess that's a good way to put it.
Yes.
Uh,
Yes.
no, but I'm glad, and I'm glad that you're letting people know about some of the content that might be in it, because I remember being in high school watching it in my Latin class,
Oh.
and even though they didn't show anything, the content's pretty rough, and I remember just being like 15, maybe 16 years old, and being like, okay, this was a pretty intense 30-minute History Channel documentary that I just watched. I was not expecting that today.
Yeah, no.
It's like, we're gonna watch a movie. You're like, cool, and it's like Boudica, and they're like, oh, cool, and it's like, oh, she's pretty cool, and then you're like, oh, wow, what's happening? Okay, that stuck with me.
Yeah.
Even like nearly 20 years later, I'm like, I remember that. But no, I think it's a really cool story. I think it's something really cool to go to see, because it is something like, there's human history is so many stories of people pushing and pushing back, and how they fight. And so hearing about Boudica, who I think not enough people know about, uh, who was able to unite the Celts at a time they were not very unitable.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, I mean, she was a diplomat as much as she was a warrior.
Yes, I mean my as Chris says, she was skilled at geopolitics. Like she knew how to how to manage the Romans and how to manage her husband and how to like sort of handle all the politics of it until it just got it just went too far. Um, yeah, and for a woman at that time, I mean, we have to remember 61 AD. I mean, women have never had the upper hand.
Mm.
And even, in Celt history, women weren't necessarily treated the same way they were in other cultures. Like women had a higher regard, but still wasn't going to be treated equally.
Right, right. It's all relative. It's kind of a sliding scale there.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, oh yeah, it's better than other places. Like, oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah, but still a woman, right? At the end of the
Right.
day, she's still just going to be called a woman.
Mm.
And we note that in the show. So yeah, it's just such a cool. It's really a cool show, and I like to get all of that history in. Like it's a 90-minute, super fast paced. Like I keep saying, it's an epic historical action. Like if all of those things can be added together, that is what it is, an epic historical action drama. So
Now you did this show at the Hollywood Fringe, and
hmm
you're bringing it's an expanded version, I believe, now at the Hollywood at the Hudson. And so, is there anything that, like, doing it at the Fringe is your first run, like, anything that you're like, oh, okay, I'm glad we experiment with that. I'm glad we try that out. Like we're gonna do this a little bit. For people who may have seen the show before, who are like, wait a second, now I'm coming back. Like, no, this is something new you're going to be experiencing.
So I will say this for Chris and I, when we do shows at Fringe, they are not experimental. They are the show. We like sort of the problem with us is that we do shows at the Fringe, but they are not Fringe shows.
Right.
Yeah, 16 people, tons of props, huge fight shows. Um, we just really rehearse it really well and pack it up really well. If you know Fringe, you know that there's like, don't bring any props. That's insane. Why would you do that? Um, yeah, and aside from we're in rehearsals right now. We're doing run throughs. We have a couple of new cast members because not everybody could do the remount. So there's new people in it. There's new beats and moments that are happening that maybe that didn't happen in the original show.
Mm.
But for all intents and purposes, it is the same production. Uh, it is the same production, just without all the rushing of having to get in and out of the space. Um, and the problem is that a lot of people actually missed it at Hollywood Fringe. We had so many people who were like, I was trying to see it and I couldn't get in. And we have a ton of other theater people who never saw it. And, those people who won't go to a Hollywood Fringe festival. So for those people, shame on you. But the show is remounting. So it's pretty much the same show.
That's awesome. I mean, yeah, the shows, for those who have not seen School of Night, Hollywood Fringe shows, they are like absolutely bonkers. Like, for those who haven't been, I don't think, or haven't done a show at the Fringe, I don't think they fully appreciate like how much work and coordination is going into getting on stage, getting all that set up, and then having like 15, maybe 30 minutes to get everything packed up after that's over with. And it's just so impressive. And you guys have always impressed me with what you put together, the stories that you tell, and like this is going to be a really, really exciting production.
Yeah, thank you for that. We do our best. We just, we're just storytellers and we just want to tell the coolest, most amazing stories we can. I mean, that's Chris. I have to give that credit to him because I am not a writer. That is not my thing. I would rather shoot myself in the head. That's all him. He comes up with that stuff, and obviously I can't direct and like, I know that's maybe an LA thing to write and direct and star and do all that crap. I cannot do all of that. I do not want to do all of that. But he directs and he does a pretty phenomenal job. And, we use all kinds of elements like kabuki and commedia. I mean, Punch and Judy was commedia and Hercules was commedia and Klingon Tamerlane was commedia. So we use all these really cool theater techniques. This show is probably the most straightforward, I would say, style-wise, than any other show we've done.
Mm.
Like we're just, normal acting. We're not doing head throws. We're not doing anything, but there's puppets. We have a couple of puppets. And then, yeah, and then the stylized dancing. There's like Celtic dancing stylized. The Romans are a little stylized here and there, but other than that, the story itself is pretty straightforward because it doesn't need all that. It's a pretty intense story.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think people, and I don't want to make people like, oh, it's going to be too intense. Like, no, it's something that Boudica is a very important historical figure. I don't want to make it sound like homework at all, but it's intense, but it's a story worth delving into and worth experiencing.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, there's a monument to her like where Albion, where Britannia was, where they think she may have died. Nobody really knows, but she's very like if you talk to somebody who's from England, they're gonna be like, oh yeah, Boudica. I know who that is.
Right. If you talk to someone in America, they're like, Boudica? Like, is that a restaurant?
Yeah.
Oh man. Well, I know I've enjoyed so much talking to you. I could probably make this a whole hour, but I wanted to give you a chance to talk to everyone again. Just remind them how they can get tickets to this, come see the show when it's playing, all that sort of jazz.
Yeah, well, so Battlesong of Boudica um, opens April 9th and runs through April 30th. We do, for our theater friends, have a Monday, April 10th is a pay what you choose night.
Mm.
Yes, yes, we're very conscious of that. So, can't afford it, come that night. It runs typically Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Friday, Saturday at 8, Sunday at 3, except for opening night, which is at 7. It's playing at the Hudson, and you can find tickets at schoolofnight.org.
Fantastic. Well, Jen, thank you so much for coming here on the show. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you. Thank you for having me.
Oh no, it was my pleasure. And of course, again, Battlesong of Boudica, playing at the Hudson Theaters. Thank you, everyone, for your continued support of LA Theater Bites and your continued support of Los Angeles Theater. We've got more episodes and reviews coming out this month, so look out for them. Until next time, I'm Matthew Robinson. I'll see you at the theater.